The time it happened was a quiet evening in an upscale gated community. What unfolded next left everyone stunned. It started with flashing red and blue lights slicing through the peaceful twilight. The residents of West Oak Estates, an exclusive neighborhood where every house had a pristine lawn and a price tag to match, weren't used to police activity. The sight of a patrol car parked at the entrance, lights blaring against the darkening sky, was unusual. But what made it even more shocking was the woman in the driver's seat of the black luxury SUV. She didn't look like she belonged. Or at least, that's what Officer Mitchell Parker thought. He had been stationed near the entrance of the community for weeks, monitoring every vehicle that entered. The neighborhood had strict membership-only access, and unless you lived there or were an approved visitor, you had no business inside. The Homeowners Association had made it clear they didn't want outsiders disturbing the peace. And now, sitting in front of him, was a black woman in an expensive car wearing a designer coat, a pair of sleek sunglasses resting on her nose. Alone. Parker had checked the community's directory twice. No one matching her name or vehicle description was registered to any home in West Oak Estates. Something about her felt off. He tapped on the window with 2 fingers. She rolled it down smoothly, her expression unreadable. "License and registration," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. The woman tilted her head slightly, her lips curling in a faint smirk. "What's the problem, officer?" "You don't live here," Parker said matter-of-factly, glancing at the directory on his in-car tablet one more time. A slow hum escaped her lips. "Interesting." She didn't argue. She didn't panic. Instead, she reached over to the glove compartment. Parker's hand hovered near his holster, his grip tightening. People reacted in different ways when they were caught lying. Some got defensive, some fumbled for excuses. But this woman, she was too calm. She pulled out a folder, smooth, deliberate movements, and flipped it open. Inside was a neatly stacked set of documents, crisp and official-looking. She selected a single sheet, tapping a manicured finger against the page before handing it over. Parker froze. The deed. The official property deed for House 297 West Oak Estates. His breath hitched. He scanned the document quickly, his pulse racing. The name on it was unmistakable. Her name, number, that wasn't possible. House 297 was listed as vacant in his system, recently foreclosed. There was no new ownership recorded. He shook his head, trying to steady himself. This can't be right. But she was already one step ahead. "Flip to the last page, officer." His hands felt clammy as he turned to the back. His stomach dropped. The signatures were fresh. The date? 2 weeks ago. Stamped, notarized, and legally binding. Mitchell Parker had just pulled over the legal owner of the house. And that's when it got worse. A sleek black sedan rolled up behind them. Parker's heart pounded as the tinted window slid down. Inside sat a man he never expected to see, a man who could ruin him. She had been waiting for this moment. Lena Matthews sat in her home office, sipping a glass of wine as she stared at the West Oak Estates security logs on her laptop. It had taken some digging, but she had finally gathered enough proof. The pattern was too obvious to ignore. Over the past 3 months, more than a dozen black homeowners had reported suspicious traffic stops just outside their own driveways. Routine stops. Just checking in. You fit the description. But the same wasn't happening to their white neighbors. Lena had spent years fighting discrimination in real estate. As a corporate lawyer, she had exposed fraudulent mortgage denials, illegal property seizures, and predatory lending practices. But this was personal. Because the house at 297 West Oak Estates wasn't just another case file. It was hers. And she was about to make sure Officer Parker never forgot it. Parker's fingers clenched the steering wheel as he recognized the man in the black sedan. Richard Langston, the mayor. The man who could decide whether Parker kept his badge or lost it. Langston's expression was unreadable as he stepped out of the car, adjusting his navy blue suit. His gray eyes locked onto Parker, then flicked to Lena. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was calm. Too calm. Parker swallowed hard. I was just verifying some information." Langston's gaze flicked to Lena. "Ma'am, do you live here?" Lena crossed her arms, amusement dancing in her eyes. "I own the house at 297. Just bought it 2 weeks ago." The mayor sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Officer Parker, do you know who this woman is?" Parker hesitated. She wasn't listed in the system." Langston's jaw tightened. "Let me enlighten you." He turned to Lena. "Ms. Matthews here is not just a homeowner. She's a real estate lawyer, one of the best in the state." He exhaled sharply. "And if I had to guess, she's already documented every second of this interaction." Parker's mouth went dry. Lena smiled. "You'd guess right, Mayor." She reached into her coat pocket, pulling out her phone. The screen was still recording. Parker's stomach twisted into knots. This was bad. Langston turned back to him, voice dangerously low. "Officer Parker, if I check your logs, am I going to find a pattern of unnecessary stops in this neighborhood?" Sweat prickled at the back of Parker's neck. His entire career flashed before his eyes. "You see, officer," Lena continued, her voice smooth, almost taunting. "I've been tracking these stops for a while now. Every black resident in this community has a story. Harassed at the gates, stopped outside their own homes." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "And guess whose name keeps coming up?" Parker's. His stomach churned. Langston inhaled deeply. "Ms. Matthews, I assure you this will be investigated." Lena raised a hand, cutting him off. "I don't want apologies, Mr. Mayor. I want accountability." Parker's hands shook. Then, before he could say anything, another car pulled up. And this time, it wasn't a friendly face, a black SUV, tinted windows, government plates. Lena's smirk widened. "Oh good, right on time." The door opened, and a man in a tailored suit stepped out. He wasn't police. He wasn't from the mayor's office. He was federal. And the look in his eyes told Parker one thing. This was bigger than just a traffic stop. This was about to change everything. A tall man stepped out, his suit crisp, his expression unreadable. He moved with precision, his gaze flicking between Lena, Parker, and the mayor. "Ms. Matthews," he greeted, his voice controlled. Lena didn't seem surprised to see him. If anything, she looked amused. "Agent Marshall," she responded, tilting her head. Parker's stomach turned. FBI. His mind raced. Why was federal law enforcement here? What the hell was going on? Langston cleared his throat, his posture stiff. "This isn't necessary, Agent. I can handle this situation." Marshall didn't even acknowledge him. His focus remained locked on Lena. "Are we proceeding as discussed?" Lena glanced at her phone, then smiled. "Absolutely." Parker's throat went dry. "Discussed? Proceeding with what?" Lena turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You see, Officer Parker, this was never just about you pulling me over. It was about everything that's been happening in this community. And it seems your little habit of stopping black homeowners is just the tip of the iceberg." The way she said it sent a chill through Parker's spine. I don't understand." "You will," Marshall said, reaching into his jacket and pulling out a thick manila envelope. He handed it to Lena. She flipped it open, scanned the contents, then exhaled sharply. "Exactly what I expected." She turned the folder around and slapped it onto the hood of Parker's patrol car. Inside were documents, legal filings, financial records, and one in particular that made Parker's blood run cold. A secret real estate scheme. The Homeowners Association. The bank that had foreclosed on dozens of black families, even city officials. It was all connected. Parker felt dizzy. His pulse pounded in his ears. What am I looking at?" he forced out. Lena tapped the page closest to him. "You're looking at proof that West Oak Estates has been running an illegal operation, forcing out black homeowners by burying them in fraudulent fees, denying them maintenance, and when they refuse to leave, they use the police to harass them. Sound familiar?" She let that hang in the air. Parker opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "You were part of it, weren't you?" she asked, her voice smooth but sharp. "Stopping us, making it clear we didn't belong. Maybe you didn't know what was really going on. Or maybe—" She stepped closer. "Maybe you did." Parker felt trapped, his hands clenched into fists. "I didn't—" "Your name is on the reports, officer," Agent Marshall interrupted. "The data doesn't lie. You've stopped black homeowners 6 times more than white residents in this neighborhood, and you filed multiple incident reports claiming certain houses were vacant when they weren't. Why would you do that?" Parker's skin burned. I just followed orders." Langston suddenly stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "That's enough. If you have accusations, take it to the courts. This is not how you handle things." Lena's smirk widened. "You sound nervous, Mayor. Almost like you have something to lose." Langston's nostrils flared. "Watch yourself, Matthews." Parker's stomach twisted. The mayor knew something. He was in on it. Lena turned back to Parker. "Tell me, officer, how much were you paid to look the other way? Was it a few extra thousand? Maybe a promotion?" But before he could respond, Marshall cut in. "Let's not waste time. We have the records. We know which houses were targeted, and we know who signed off on these foreclosure reports." He flipped one of the documents around. Langston's name was on it. The mayor went still. Parker felt like the ground had been ripped from under him. This wasn't just about racial profiling. It was bigger. A full-scale corruption ring. Lena exhaled. They forced black homeowners out and sold their homes to pre-selected buyers at dirt-cheap prices, then flipped them for millions. And Officer Parker here helped enforce their little gatekeeping operation, whether he knew it or not. Parker's knees nearly buckled. Langston lost it. "That's ridiculous." He turned to Marshall. "You have no real evidence of—" "You're under investigation, Mayor," Marshall said coldly. "I suggest you stop talking." Silence. Then Langston's expression shifted. His anger faded. His body tensed. Parker knew that look. It wasn't defeat. It was calculation. Langston's next move was already forming, and that's when Parker saw it. The mayor's hand, moving toward his jacket pocket. Parker's heart jumped. "Don't!" he blurted. Too late. Langston lunged. A flash of metal. A gun. Lena gasped. Marshall's hand shot toward his holster. Parker didn't think. He reacted. He tackled Langston. The mayor's gun went off. A deafening crack split the air. Lena stumbled back, eyes wide. Marshall yanked his weapon. "Drop it!" Langston struggled under Parker's weight, teeth clenched. "You idiots don't understand!" Parker slammed him against the hood of the patrol car, wrenching the gun from his grip. His breath was ragged. His mind spun. This was the mayor of the city, and he had just tried to kill someone. Lena stepped forward, straightening her coat. Her voice was eerily calm. "Guess we found out who was really pulling the strings." Marshall grabbed his radio. "I need immediate backup at West Oak Estates. One suspect in custody, armed and dangerous." Langston thrashed, but it was over. The sirens came fast. The flashing lights illuminated the truth. The conspiracy was real. The entire system had been working against people like Lena, and Parker had been part of it. He stepped back, watching as Marshall and the arriving officers hauled Langston into the back of a squad car. For the first time, Parker saw everything clearly. The stops, the fear, The way he had treated people like Lena, he thought he had just been doing his job. But what if his job had never been about justice? What if he had been a pawn in something much bigger? Lena turned to him one last time, studying him. "You should ask yourself something, Officer Parker," she said softly. "Now that you know the truth, what are you going to do about it?" The question burned in his mind as the sirens wailed, drowning everything else out.